Okay. First off, hello everyone. Welcome to Office Document Accessibility, presented by the IT Accessibility Initiative of MDTAP under the Maryland Department of Disabilities. My name is Stephen Polachek. I am the IT Accessibility Program Specialist here today. And before we start the session, just a few common housekeeping items. First off, we have captioning available today. You can either turn on the captioning in Zoom using the captioning button, or you can use this link that I have just sent to everyone, and that will open it in a separate window if that is your preference. We already have a question. Thank you. I will get to questions at 2 points during this session. One after I do a summary of the basics of all the common requirements for documents, and then one after I do the demonstrations for the specific programs. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully within a few days, regarding processing and such. And then I believe that is everything. And if you have any further questions after the session, please feel free to reach out. With that, let us go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start today off with the, here are the basic principles of accessible documents. We're going to talk about 6 different categories today. So first is headings and structure. So how do you get around the document? How do you organize the document? Second is the intended reading order, because if you are using custom layouts or changing content and moving it around, that can change how a computer or assistive technology, also known as AT, interprets the document. It might not be how you want your audience to read it. So making sure that we double check that. Third is alternative text. The very first thing you will hear at any accessibility webinar or conference or presentation ever, making sure that you have descriptions of images and any other non-text content for those using AT, or those who are deaf or hard of hearing, or for those who are blind. A lot of different uses for it. Fourth is meaningful link text, making sure that we are telling people where they are going when they click that link, so they don't either be suspicious of it or they don't have to try and figure it out or interpret it on their own. Fifth, we'll talk a little bit about tables and data relations in all 3 programs, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. Talking about how you can create the relationships between data using the headings and making sure that your tables have as much information as possible to make it easier on the user. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about form fields and labels, making sure that if you're creating a form in Word or in Excel, that you're properly instructing people as to what data you want from them. So with that, let's start with our headings and structure. So headings provide a method for finding content quickly. Visually, a lot of us look for, bolded words, use maybe a short phrase, something like that. Now, it's important that you use the presets in these programs to add additional functionality, especially for AT users, because visually, if you, bold like headings and structure in this case, if you bold that, enlarging it, it doesn't function as a heading unless you use a style. Once you've done that, it'll show up in like the navigations pane that I will show you when we get to Word. Screen readers can use it as a jump point so they can move from heading to heading rather than have to move through all of your content to find it. So it's really important that we use those preset styles to have as much functionality out of this as possible. The second point is we want to use headings to signify content relation. I like to talk about this as an outline, but there's other ways you can think about it, like nesting and such. The best practice for most documents is typically start your document with a heading level 1, So that's kind of the jump point or the starting point of your document. If I'm at the end of the document, I can use the shortcut or navigation pane to jump right up to the top there and back to the start. Every major section will start then with a heading level 2. So that's kind of your breakdowns of your document. And then any subsets for those areas, you'll start with a heading 3 and then move further down. In HTML, there's heading levels 1 through 6. In Word, there's heading levels 1 through 9. It's really uncommon to move below 3 or 4 unless you're producing a really large document like a thesis for a class or an annual report for your agency. So in general, just think about how you're going to be breaking down your information and how far into the subjects you're going to need heading levels. And just trying to make sure that you're organizing it in a consistent manner so that people can easily identify what section they're looking for and what information they need. A good idea also for some kinds of documents, especially more complex ones, like a data annual report or in like an Excel sheet. If you're using like for banking data or financial data or something, you want to make sure that you're following a template, because that takes care of a lot of the work for you. It sets up the headings, it'll set up the nesting for you, it'll set the reading order for you, and that takes care of 80 to 90% of this work. Customizing a layout or making it from scratch requires some thought on your part, because now you have to do all that yourself. Not that you can't, but it's something I would recommend doing after you're a bit more comfortable with these concepts and how to apply them. Before I get too much further, I do want to say I'm going to demonstrate all of these things when we get to Word and PowerPoint and such. So if things aren't quite making sense, hopefully they will in the second half of the presentation today. Okay. Now, second point, intended reading order. I like to call it intended reading order because in general, it's the idea of this is how I want you guys to read my document. Whenever you're putting out anything publicly, you're thinking about how is my audience going to receive this message. So depending on the layout you've put in, you might intend someone to read the first column, then the second column, and then a third paragraph, and then an image, and then a fourth paragraph, maybe 2 more columns after that. You want to make sure that it's reading in that order that you've set. It's a lot easier in Word and Microsoft Office than it is in the Adobe Suite, because the Adobe Suite allows you to do a lot more moving around in different layouts. It's more of a graphical program. So it's harder to mess this up really in Word and such, but it's still doable. But that's why you want to make sure you're using those templates, because that kind of sets the reading order for you. You don't have to worry about it as much. But you still, if you're changing the layout in any way into kind of a non-traditional document, it's going to affect the reading order. So you kind of want to make sure that you check it after the fact. If you have any familiarity with using any screen reader, MDTA is a free one that's very widely used nowadays. Microsoft has Narrator, which is built into it. Those into the operating system. You have to open it from the ease of access menu. But those can let you read through it. Another easy way to do this is to follow your mouse cursor, or rather your cursor. If you just press the down arrow, it should follow the reading order for you. So a good idea just to follow that and check that, make sure that it's going in the flow that you want users to go. Images. When you first put an image into a document, usually it's in line with text. So that means it has a defined relationship point between the text above it, the text after it, and what have you. If you change that to any kind of wrapping text, that might change how it's read if it's not like really clear where it is. And when I show you guys the accessibility checker, it'll give you a warning about that this object is on essentially a different layer. It's either above or below text, and that might change where it's read in the document. In some cases, it might be read before everything else in the document. It might be read after everything else in the document. It might get skipped. It might be in the middle of a paragraph where you didn't want them to read it because visually it looks like it's to the right of the paragraph and the paragraph is separate. But programmatically, when AT is reading it, they'll read the first half of the paragraph, and because you have that image inserted there to float it in the center, it looks at the image and then finishes the paragraph. So we just want to make sure that we're paying attention to how those images are interrupting the text flow. One tip I do want to give you guys here, and again, I'll show you this when we get to PowerPoint, is its reading order is found in the Arrange menu and the Selection pane. It's a bit different from other programs because in that list of elements, it actually starts at the bottom and then goes upwards. So rather than intuitively going, top to bottom, it does the opposite. So you just need to be aware of that as you're looking for it. That can also affect visual stacking. So you also need to pay attention to, are objects overlapping each other? Does that affect how it presents visually? You might have to get a little creative with how you set up the reading order there and how you put elements together, because you might have to finagle the look or move things around, or even sometimes change that slide entirely in order to make it work how you want it to. Alternative text, the thing you will hear about at any accessibility presentation ever. It is rule 1 of the guidelines. I'm not going to go into terribly much detail here because you can find information about this everywhere. Our previous webinars have talked about it a lot. You can, there's stuff on our website, there's stuff on other websites. There's a lot to this, but here's kind of your general rules of thumb to start off with. First, be accurate and concise. Don't add any interpretation. Don't add any subjective opinions of the image. Just describe, what is this image conveying? What am I showing you with this image? You want to make sure that you limit your description to a few words or even maybe a sentence or two at most, because when AT, like a screen reader, focuses that image, it has to read the description in one go. If they pause it, stop it, leave it, come back, they have to hear the entire thing again. And that can become burdensome because, you have to, listen to this entire paragraph breaking down this thing. And it might not be useful information to them. I'll show you a few examples when we get to the demonstration, but it's important that we avoid redundancy as well, so that if this image is not adding any additional content, we want to make sure, like if you have a paragraph and then an image of the same thing, or if it's like a chart, but you have all of the data written out in text next to it, then we can mark that as decorative. So we want to make sure that we're telling users that they can skip this. In older versions of Word, like the 2016 version I'm using, you can't do that. So you have to add alt text saying decorative. In Office 365 and later versions, you are able to. There should be a checkbox that says mark as decorative. That will allow AT to skip it. And so they don't have to deal with elements like a horizontal rule that is breaking up sections visually. Just a quick check on this. Okay. All right. And okay, so another rule, general rule of thumb, is never use image of or picture of. AT will do that for you. So again, we're avoiding that redundancy of someone hearing MDTAP logo, image, graphic. Because the screen reader or other assistive technologies will announce what that element is, it'll tell you it's a link, it'll tell you it's an image, it'll tell you it's an image link. We don't want to keep adding that extra on. It's just a way to make this more comfortable and easier for users. We want to make sure that we're giving a good user experience to our audience. And then finally, one kind of caveat to all of this is if your image is actually functioning as a link, you should instead state the destination, because AT is going to use that as the description of the link versus the description of the image. So in that case, whatever the image is becomes kind of irrelevant. Speaking of meaningful links, link text itself should denote the destination. So we want to kind of give a short description of where we're going, or giving an indication of what the subject matter is going to be. If URLs aren't always clear, especially when they're read aloud by AT. So adding that link text is usually a better option. If it's something simple like our website, the initial homepage, ndod.maryland.gov. Very simple, that can work fine as its standard link text. Now, our particular page for the IT Accessibility Initiative has /pages/news/web-accessibility.aspx. So that adds, this whole other string, and that can get further into if you start clicking links or you go into a news article, and now you have this string of characters that's just gibberish. We want to avoid users hearing that and not understanding where they're going. So that's why adding that link text, like check out our latest blog post here, using that phrase gives us a very good idea of where that link's going to go. Email addresses, though, are always acceptable as is, because again, if you're explaining that as an email, or it says at gmail.com or whatever, people understand that that's an email address, so that's always fine. Especially if they don't want to click it, they just want to copy paste it or even type it in themselves manually, we can leave that up to them. Usually for link text, honestly, page title or a simple phrase like I mentioned earlier is usually sufficient, but you don't want to use click here or just a single word. Because again, we want to make sure A, people know where they're going, and B, we want to give them sufficient target, excuse me, to click on or to activate. Because in the case of someone who has, like, say, Parkinson's, and their hands shake too much to use a mouse effectively, they might have trouble clicking on just a single word versus a whole phrase. It also helps someone like using a screen reader, because if they're pressing tab to just move through links and interactive elements, say in that phrase there, don't use click here or a single word. If just word is the link and I'm just pressing tab to move through, I only hear word link. If I read through all of the bullet points, then I would hear don't use click here or a single word, pause, word link. But providing that upfront as an entire phrase makes it just, again, better for users in general. As I mentioned earlier, image links should use the alt text to inform AT users. Typically, if you have an image and text in there, it's going to read the alt text first. So you want to make sure that you're providing that information immediately, and then you don't usually need the text in addition to. If you don't put any alt text there, it will just read graphic link. And so a user won't know at all what the image is, where they're going, what the link is for, any of that. So that's why we need to make sure that we're using it in that manner. Final point for this is we want to make sure our links are visibly distinguishable from regular text. Use the default, use that underline, that change in color, but we want to make sure that we're not using color as the only method, because someone who is colorblind might not be able to distinguish the difference. They might not think it's a link, so having an underline or maybe a box around it or something like that in order to clue in people to the fact that this is a link, you can use it. Okay. All right. Tables and data. So A lot of times people like to use tables and documents for formatting purposes because visually, yes, it looks very nice with everything nice and lined up, and you can create extra space. That's great. But the problem with that is that it changes behaviors for AT users. Someone who's using Dragon and is trying to move to that using their voice might not realize it's a table, especially if you take away like the cell looks and such. And Dragon might start telling them it's a table, and now they have to change their behavior with it. Same for a screen reader. If they move into that table with the formatting to use maybe a form that you've built in the table, now it's going to start giving them extraneous information like what row and column they're in. If there's anything lining up, it'll start reading those against each other. And that's just a lot of extra hassle that they have to deal with, especially because the way that they navigate a table is different how they would navigate a form. So that's why, in general, try to avoid using tables for formatting purposes. In Word documents such as this, there isn't really a good way to change that behavior. It's not like HTML where we can tell the table, don't read to AT as a table. So that's why, in general, don't use them for formatting purposes. If you're using them for data or to present other information, we want to make sure you're adding a heading row and a first column if that's applicable to your data set. This maintains the relationship between data so that users don't have to backtrack. So if you're in row 4, column 4, that cell D4, if you have the heading row on, when a screen reader moves to that cell, they'll hear the contents of the cell, then they'll hear the heading, and then they'll hear the actual cell number D4. If they have the first row, that gets added into that chain as well, so that they don't have to go back up to the top to make sure they're in the right column or go all the way to the left to make sure they're in the right row. The cell itself will tell them. So it makes things, again, a lot easier and a lot smoother for users to understand where they are, what this data is in relation to, and they're finding what they're looking for. Per links that we mentioned earlier, you want to make sure color is not your only conveying method. If you're talking about like, is this project good on your status sheet, or if this project is still in progress, or there's a problem, you're using maybe green, yellow, red, usual color lights. But you want to make sure that you add a symbol or some other kind of formatting to connect that. Again, making sure that those who are colorblind or those who may have visual impairments are able to understand that denotation versus just using color and they're not able to interpret that. And then finally, charts are difficult to make accessible at this time, especially in things like Word and Excel, where they're usually treated as graphics themselves. There isn't really a way to read the data points inside them. So if possible, try to use a table instead, or have it available as an alternative, or even maybe write up a summary of the chart for users, just so you have a way for someone who can't visually use that chart or can't distinguish the categories in it because of like color differentiations or what have you, so that they can still get that same information. Charts are kind of a more complex thing. I talk a lot about them more in the accessible graphic design webinar. There should be a recording of that on our YouTube channel. If not, there will be one later in the year, or you can reach out to me to learn more about charts specifically. All right. Our final category before we get into the demonstrations is forms and labels. So the thing to keep in mind here is, first off, AT or screen readers, Dragon, what have you, use the names and help text of the form field to label it. So when a screen reader focuses that first text box you've created, it reads the help text that says, this is asking for your first name. You can edit that in the properties dialog of that form field. So this does get a little tedious depending on how large your form is, because you're going to have to edit every single one, but I promise you it's worth it. You also want to make sure that you're giving enough space so that any visible labels you create are easily related to fields. Again, just making sure that if it's to the left of the box or it's above the box, you're giving enough space between the next set of data that you're asking for, so that people visibly are easily able to distinguish what label is going to what field. If you're changing your layout at all, say you have that, if you're using that table, even though I tell you not to, making sure you're double checking the reading order, because a table is much more free flowing, so a user can move around in the cells however they wish. They might not read it in the order you want it to. Or if you're using something like the multi-column layout in Word, you want to make sure that, because by default, it's going to go down the first column, then move to the second column, that's how you want people to read it. If you do first name, last name in a 2-column layout, but you have then address underneath it, a screen reader is going to go first name, then address, then last name. So be aware of that fact, is it's not going to interpret it how you're interpreting it visually. I've said it multiple times already, say it again. Try to avoid using tables for formatting, because it does change how that interacts. So as much as you can, even if it looks pretty, try to do a manual layout instead. If you're using like Excel for a form, that's a bit different, obviously, because Excel by its its standard is a table. So just be aware of that it is adding that extraneous information. Sometimes you can use that to your advantage, because you can tell users, start here, go to a cell D5 or something, and the form will start there. So it can work to your advantage, but that takes a little bit more work. So it's good practice to try and keep to a more standard layout. Final point for this is try to avoid locking editing privileges, because that actually blocks AT. So things like screen readers and Dragon, which is voice control software, can't read the document then, because you're stopping the cursor from moving around those words and being able to interpret it. So if you do that, in order to avoid users editing the rest of the document, and they can only edit the edit fields, you'll need to create instructional read-only fields before you lock the file. I'll show you a little bit about how to do that when we get to it. This might have changed. I haven't gotten a definitive answer if 365 allows a screen reader to still read the rest of it. Adobe in the last few years has made progress in this, and where you're still able to read the document even if it's locked. But in general, try to avoid doing that if you can. All right. Before we get into the demonstrations, we have a few questions that I'm going to try and answer. So first, for document links such as .pdfs, is it best practice to have them open in a new tab? If you're talking about on a website, that's kind of the default behavior. That isn't truly a problem, as long as the code is in there that tells a user, like for HTML, that should be, I think, target _ blank equals _ blank. So that opens in a new tab, that's fine, because they'll be told that behavior is there. For a lot of PDFs, that's, I think, default actually, because they usually just don't open on the page you're on. If you're talking about inside a document, again, I think that's a default, because it's treating it as a separate file. I don't know if you can just open a file within a file in those cases, unless it's something like, opening an Excel sheet while you're inside a Word document. As for, is it best practice or not? I don't have a definitive answer for you. I'm sorry, because in general, either behavior is kind of okay. It's more about, you don't want to have too many in sequence where they're opening 17 tabs while they're trying to read through something. And the only real rule of thumb there is that you do need to inform them this will open in a new tab. Okay. Second question, are there any WordPress plugins that you would recommend that can scan the website for flagging ADA compliance fixes? I don't know of any specifically for WordPress. A lot of the ones that I know of are actually part of, or for the browser. So for instance, for my work, when I do website evaluations, there are 3 different ones that I've used. There is Andy, which is available from the Department of Homeland Security. It is the one used for trusted tester certification and for the section 508 testing to making sure that you're able to test websites. And then there's also Axe DevTools, which is available from DQ. That's another in-browser scanner. And then W3C, the organization that has made the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, is one that uses or is another browser extension for programs like Word and Adobe and the rest of the Microsoft Office suite. It has a built-in checker, so you don't really need a plugin for anything. If you're working with Google Workspace, there are plugins for that. We are planning a presentation in end of March alongside the NFB, Center for Excellence in Non-Visual Access, also known as CINA. And we'll go into a lot more depth about the Google Workspace and what plugins are available for that. Okay. All right, for PowerPoint, do you prefer using the selection pane or reading order pane? I always use the selection pane because that also lets you see kind of how it's affected visually, because if you move something underneath like text or whatever, depending on where it is in that selection pane, it's also going to change that. For purposes of just checking the reading order, either works. I honestly think they're the same thing. I don't know if they actually read separate items, but I've always just done the selection pane because habit, really. Okay. Yes, someone said for websites, target equals _blank. Yep. Thank you. And you're welcome. I am guessing that chat is not functioning for some reason because people have posted in the Q&A. If that is correct, I apologize. I thought I had changed that setting prior to this, but there's the potential that I didn't. So, oh, chat is working. Great, excellent. So you can put questions in Q&A or in chat. I'll try and deal with both. Thank you for confirming that chat is working. With that, though, it seems like we are good on questions for now. So I am going to change my share. Give me just a moment to switch to Microsoft Word. Here we go. All right. So we're going to run through creating a document from the start according to our accessibility principles that I have shown you. Give me just a moment. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right slide before when I get back. There we go. All right. Okay. So we're going to start off with our headings and structure. As I mentioned, if I type in, MDOD overview document, and then let's select this, we'll make it bold. Let's pump it up to 20-point font. Let's change it to Times New Roman. Great. And then let me go back to default. And I start typing, introduction blurb goes here. So visually, I think of MDOD overview as a heading. Now, I can go to the View tab, and then I want to open the navigation pane, which is in the Show group. It's the third checkbox there, just after grid lines. It opens this window on the left. That lets me, I can find it by, searching. I think if you do Control F, this opens as well. You can open by pages, you can see search results, but also has a headings tab. Now, this MDOD overview is not functioning as a heading currently, so it doesn't show up in navigation. So visually it's a heading, but for purposes of moving around the document quickly or for someone, an AT user, it's not a heading, it's just text. That's why we need to make sure that we're using the styles in the home ribbon. So if I reselect that, change it to a heading 1, now it shows up in this navigation pane. You can also kind of check by if you hover over it, this little tiny arrow shows up, and if you click that, it hides everything underneath it. But if that shows up, that means it's functioning as a heading. So I can go into this, and then let me add maybe a couple of the programs under MDOD. So like Access Maryland, do that, and then we'll do MDTAP. Let me add the IT Access Initiative. All right, so now let me build my structure here. So each of these, or that summary is just going to be the text under Access Maryland, but I want to make that a heading 2 because it's a major content block. I'm going to do that with MDTAP because it's the same level of program. It's it's a separate program underneath there. You can see how they're nested under MDOD overview. Now, IT Access Initiative, the program I'm part of, is actually under MDTAP. So it's a subset. So that's why I want to use heading 3, because person will go to MDTAP, they'll understand that this is a major program, but then they'll understand, because of this connotation of heading 3, that the IT Access Initiative is a subset of TAP. If you notice again, it kind of creates that outline structure that we're looking for because it's nested under there. So, and then also if I'm further in the document, like if I jump way all the way down here, and then I click this again over on the left, jumps me back up there. So if you have a longer document, someone who is sighted or is using just a keyboard, they can use this navigation pane to quickly jump to the section they want. Someone who's using a screen reader has shortcuts built into their program, that they can use as well to jump around. So that's how you can create that navigation structure and actually use it for yourself. Now, these headings, you can change the look of them once you've used the style. So I can make this now, 20-point font, bolded, let's make it black. So, I can make it look however I want. I can also use this to make a style. So if I change, let's make this a heading. I can open the styles menu in the home ribbon. I can click create a style, which is the option after all the lists. First dialog is going to say, do you want to name this? And you can just click OK. I want to instead click modify because that lets me determine how this is going to behave. So that first one is your name. So I can say, custom heading. Let's make it a custom heading 2. Style type is just how it's going to deal with. Is it going to deal with just the paragraph? Do I want just the characters, so how it actually looks, or do I want both of those together? Typically, you're going to use linked because you want it to behave both in the paragraph form and the character form. Now, the style based on is where it determines that behavior. So in this case, since I'm saying this is a custom heading level 2, I want to select heading level 2. As you notice, I can go all the way down to heading level 9. And if you're more versed in Word than I am, you can start looking at, like, here's table of contents, captions, lists, body text, footers. You can do indexes. You can do different kinds of lists. There's a lot you can do with this. So the more comfortable you are with Word and changing these kind of things, you can do whatever you want. For our purposes, though, we really just want to make sure that this is behaving like the other headings here. Now, the following paragraph means that after I press enter, what is the next line going to be? In this case right now, it's saying every line after this, it's going to treat like a heading level 2. I don't want that because really I'm just going to create a heading and then I'm going to want to type normal text afterwards. So I'm going to click normal. So that'll treat it as a standard paragraph. No spacing just means that there's no spacing above or below, I believe. But then I can change that. Now, right now, this is only for this document. If you're creating a lot of documents for your department and you have a lot of, you have a style that is typically used, your standard branding, you might want to say new documents based on this template. So that way that style is shared across all of your, whenever you open Word, you're going to have that style selection available to you. That's why you also have the add to styles gallery checked. So that's why you do that. You can also change the look in here if you want. It'll work the same way. Typically, it's just easier just to highlight what you're using as an example and select it from there. So now I can, again, just type in summaries here, resources, and that's the basics of that navigation structure. Now, in this case, our reading order is pretty much well set because it's a standard document. We're reading from top down standard English. If I had switched to a multi-column layout, which I believe is in design, in paragraph spacing, this is when I start changing the look and layout of my document. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into that, but the reading order, again, you can kind of check in that regards where I can just run my cursor down and it'll show me how it's reading. If I had the multi-column layout set up here, then you would see it go from the left column into the right column, but it's going to go all the way through the left column first. All right, alternative text. So let me throw an image in here quick. Let me grab our logo. And I'm going to move this up underneath MDTAP. And I'm going to, there we go. So before adding alternative text, we need to get into the format picture menu. So if you're using the format ribbon at the top, you'll need to go to the picture styles group and you're going to need that corner menu or that corner button right after picture layout. You can also bring up the context menu on the image and go to format picture. This panel on the right will open. I need to move my camera out of the way and go to layout and properties. And then here is your alt text. So I can add MDTAP logo here. Typically, description is almost always red. Title is usually additional information, depending on the complexity of the screen reader. So like NVDA and JAWS will read title first, and then you have the option of reading the longer description. In some cases, it's just going to read both. In some cases, it'll just read the description. So in general, I tend to just put both just for safety purposes. That's perfectly fine. Now, in this case, since this is our organization logo, that is why I'm writing it as MDTAP logo, because that is the information you need to get. If I don't want to go into a description of the logo itself, A, because it's really long, B, it's not really relevant. I'm really just showing you what our logo is. Now, if I was handing this document out to the public, first thing, via email blast or whatever, I might want to go into a bit more detail in the description versus title. So I might say Maryland Department of Disabilities Assistive Technology Program logo. So that way they get some additional information just about the whole acronym because they might not recognize the acronym. If I have that acronym up here in the summary, if I say, MDOD, MDOD Technology Assistance Program, and then I put MDTAP after that. Currently, with the reading order, the image will follow that. And in that case, because I've already set up the understanding that MDTAP means Technology Assistance Program, this can revert back to just MDTAP logo because I have that context information. So that's where their reading order might affect it. If I put this logo before that, put it above the heading, well, that changes the connotation or the context. So then I need that full description. So think about how those are going to be in relation to each other. If this was just like a dividing line between the two, in Office 365, there would be a checkbox here that says mark as decorative. If I don't have that, I'll just put decorative here. And that way a user knows they can just skip this. It's not helpful. It's not useful to them. It's just to look pretty. If this is instead going to our website, in that case, I might say MDTAP homepage. So if this was a link, they'll know this is going to the MDTAP homepage. So that's the benefit of using the alt text there. Again, that's that meaningful link text. When we create a link, out of habit, I hit Control K. That's to add a hyperlink. You can also use the insert ribbon to add that, or the context menu to do the same thing. In this text to display field, which is at the start of the dialog, this is where you would write in your text. You can also, obviously click and highlight text to use. In this case, resources under MDTAP would be pretty significant. But let me create a new one. If I just put mjd.maryland.gov, it's going to auto cap. But if I instead wanted this to go to like our website or something, in which case, let me grab our website quick. That address is longer, but also this doesn't say IT Access Initiative, it just says Web Accessibility. So I might change this to say IT Access Initiative homepage. So that way a user will hear that, but they won't hear that long URL, especially if I add like one of the subsections of there. And this way it gives users an easier understanding of that. By default, obviously it's blue and underlined, so that's perfectly acceptable for making sure that people can distinguish it from other text. Depending on your branding or your style, you might change that, but again, just making sure it doesn't match your text up here or your headings in this case, because that blue is fairly similar to that link. So making sure, again, people are able to visually distinguish between different types of text on your thing. Tables. Inserting a table, I'm just going to do a quick one here. Tables. Again, tables are going to have they're going to have alt text as well, actually, if you open the table properties. If I go to layout, and then the third button is properties, there is an alt text here. For tables, that's usually just what is the title of the table. If it's a really big table with a lot of data in it, you might do a short summary of this table shows you the addresses for all of Department of Disabilities locations throughout the state or something. Just a quick summary so that when a user first moves into that table, they'll hear and understand what is this table showing them. You might have done that in text outside of it though. You can also repeat. So two things. Let me jump back. In the design ribbon of the table tools, it'll show up when you're in the table. These checkboxes that start this ribbon, header row and first column, are what apply that heading row that maintains that data relation. So if I add address here, and then I add MDTAP here, and then I put our address, 301 Argonne Drive. When a screen reader moves to this cell, they'll hear 2301 Argonne Drive, address MDTAP D4. So they'll get that entire string that tells them what's in the cell, what are the headings associated with that cell, so that data relation, and then what cell they're actually in. So that is the benefit of that. In some cases, if I go back to the properties of the table, if a table is split across pages, you might need to select this and go to the row and say repeat as header row at the top of each page. So that way it treats it as a heading. I think I actually had to select the row in order to do that. I apologize. So I need to turn that on in order to say treat this as a header row wherever the table is present. I'm going to cancel that so that I can show you one last thing. I'll show you in a moment. First, let's do forms. Now, the developer ribbon for adding forms is something that needs to be added via your options for your program. So just be aware of that. Developer isn't available by default. When you add any kind of field here, oops. So checkbox, which there we go. Lock myself into. So these, you can get to the properties menu only from the ribbon, as far as I found. These properties, when you open that, it's a dialog. The very first thing is title, and the second field is tag. That's your labels for assistive technology. So this can be first name. I want these to match because both are going to be used in different scenarios by assistive technology. So I want to make sure I'm always giving them the same information. So do that. If you notice, it also visually appears here. In the case of, when you're making a form, I feel disappointed. I want to make sure that there's also, text around it saying that. Checkbox is going to be the same thing, properties, title, and tag. That's where I add that information. If for whatever reason you're using an older form that uses these legacy controls like these, same idea, you'll go to properties. But in this case, we need to use the add help text button, and we need to add it here. And typically, you'll want to type your own because auto text is almost never going to be correct. But in these cases, because it's those older ones, it uses the help text as the label versus any of the fields in the default dialog. So we need to make sure we add it there. That concept applies to any of the legacy form controls. So, see a question quick. Okay, I'm going to answer this question quick. I'm running a little bit fast here. I have a very basic question. Are PDFs readable by AT? Yes, if they are tagged. We talk a lot about this more in other webinars, but what you need to do is make sure that you either, if you're working in Word, you can, when you save it as an Adobe PDF, because I haven't saved this document, I'm going to try and do this quick. We'll do this. We're just going to just put it on my desktop. Save. So now I had to save it. Now it opens for the PDFs. I want to go to options. And then this third checkbox, enable accessibility and reflow with tagged Adobe PDF. So if you're converting from Word or another Office program to Adobe, you need to check this so that all of the work that you've done to make this accessible is ported to Adobe. If you don't do that, the initial PDF is not going to be accessible. If you have the paid version of Acrobat Pro DC, it has tools in it that you can use in order to make a document accessible and make it readable by AT. We'll go into that later in the year. I believe April and May, we're going to have 2 separate webinars on this topic. So keep in touch with that. Or you can go back and look at our document accessibility webinar on our YouTube channel. All right, so last thing I want to show you in Word, and this applies to PowerPoint and Excel, is the accessibility checker. So you can open it from File, and then in the Info tab, the second button, Inspect Document, and then the second option under that, Check Accessibility. It opens this accessibility checker window on the right, or this panel. And that will tell us what issues do we still have with our document. This is a good starting point for anyone learning how to make things accessible, because this covers a lot of the basics that we've talked about. So in this case, our table doesn't have alt text. It also doesn't have a header row specified because I didn't check that split header row in the options. So it'll also tell me why I should do this. You know, a table header row contains headings that provide context and aid navigation of data. Great. How do I fix it? Well, it tells you if I scroll down. It tells me I need to select the table, highlight that row, click on Table Tools Layout, and then click Repeat Header Rows in the data group. So it tells you how to fix the issues, why you need to fix them, and it'll find things missing. Like if I had taken out the alt text of this image, it would show up here. Once I've taken that out, in this case, all right, for the sake of time, I'm just going to delete the table. Oops. And then, so now this document has no accessibility issues, and it should be good to go. There's obviously a lot more to accessibility than just what this thing can find, but like I said, it's a good starting point for when you're first learning how to make documents accessible. All right. Now I am going to switch to PowerPoint. And there we go. All right. You should be seeing the program, not the slide show. So hopefully you are. But with this, a lot of the stuff is the same. Now, since we're working with PowerPoints and slides, our slide layouts kind of add like the default, like this is treated as a heading or a title. Since you're not adding all that text, the navigation structure is kind of more set by that. But as I mentioned, this arrange button and then the selection pane. And in this case, if I go to my first slide, because this is a title slide, but I added an additional item, if you notice, all right, it's going to read in this order. If I run the accessibility checker here, I'm just going to use from my recently used list. If you notice, it warns me of that, to check the reading order here because it's not using a traditional layout. I've changed the layout, so it's saying, hey, you might want to check that this follows what you want. Again, it also tells you how to fix it. So you can set it, it says click arrange, choose selection pane, and then it tells you, again, it's read with the bottom item first and then ends with the top item. So it starts with the title, then the subtitle, then the image. So I can rearrange this however I want. If I had several images on here, I might want to put them in a certain order. One thing I do want to show you quick is if this case, whatever's on top is going to show on top, obviously. If I move this down below title because I want to be read first, visually it falls underneath that. That's why you want to be really careful about stacking, because in this case now I can't read that. Or if you have like a flow chart or something with arrows and such, it might change how it looks based on you trying to set up the correct reading order. So you might need to get a little creative with either spacing or with the reading order itself to address that. Or you might need to put things like, an image and next to its description or something. And if they're slightly overlapping, or like in this case, this has like a white space of, it kind of falls over top and blocks that blue part of the thing, of the background, you might need to mess with just the description and how it relates to other objects. Like a flow chart, you might need to say arrow from step 1 to step 2 and that kind of thing. Also, as you notice, we need to add alt text here. It's same as Windows. We go to, or as Word, we go to format picture, we go to layout and properties, and we add our alt text here. So, and then as you notice, I put that in, the error clears, and we're good to go. Again, same thing with Word and such. You do want to check color. If I run down to resources, if you notice our links in here are kind of purpley. I did that manually because the original color, if I go to design and then to variants, and then I click the drop down on variants to go to color, the default for this it's something like those like really light blue. That's a contrast error because I, who do not have color blindness, I'm having trouble reading that. So someone who does is going to struggle with it. So I customized it by going to the customize button, and then I'm able to go down to hyperlink and I can change that color. It also gives you kind of a sample. So you can see in this case, a followed hyperlink, if it's going to be on a blue background, it's going to struggle. So I might want to change that to a darker blue, but then in that case, it struggles over there. So I need to find a color in here that works with both light and dark. Or be very careful about where I put links, and just make sure that if I'm using that, any links that they don't end up on those kind of backgrounds. So that's a way you can change your color schemes in there without having to, change all of these one by one. All right, we are at time. So the only thing I'm going to just do one last quick thing with Excel. And I'm going to just show you quick. Again, this has the accessibility checker in it as well, so you can always use that. In the case of headings and such, your cell styles is where you're going to add those on. So this is now heading 1. And then once that's styled as a heading, I can change its look however I wish. So keep in mind, just that adds that relationship. So if I, write down here MDTAP and then Access Maryland, I'm going to always hear MDOD overview when I get to that cell. Now, if I merge cells, that's okay. Just be aware of the fact that this will now act as a heading for 3 separate columns rather than just 1. So in this case, if I put the address for TAP here, I'm going to hear MDOD overview when I go to MDTAP, but I'm also going to hear it for the address 231 Argonne. So just be aware of that fact that if you're merging cells, it's going to change those context for you. Excel is a bit more powerful in this regard because you can make headings further into the thing. You can create those separate tables, that kind of thing. There's also some good tips for you that I don't have time to get into. But I am going to change my share again, screen 2. And here we are. So these quick cards are available on our website, and they give you a nice simple breakdown of what you should be doing for each of these. They were provided to us by the Minnesota IT Services. They generously allowed us to customize them to fit us. We have ones for Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, and there are ones available for other programs as well. So with that, I need to get back the slideshow. Apologies. Let me just jump to the end quick. All right. Ooh. That's the problem when you hold down a button and it just kind of jumps on you. Oh, sorry about that. Ooh. All right. Apologies, trying to go too quickly. Here we go. Resources. If you have more questions or you want follow-up information about this, you can email us at mdod.nva@maryland.gov. If you're a state agency and you want help with a document or website evaluation or whatever, you can submit a ticket to the Do It service desk. Just make sure you add IT accessibility request to the subject line. If you want to learn more from our previous webinars, or you want to find this webinar after we've set it up, you can go to our YouTube channel. MDTAP video is the username. Those quick cards, again, are on our IT Accessibility Initiative page. This slide deck will be sent out to you guys along with the recording later this week. And then finally, section 508.gov has a great content creation section, and it includes these 3 programs. With that, do we have any final questions? I realize I ran a little bit long and I apologize, but I hope everyone got what they needed today. Okay, it doesn't seem like we have any further questions. So if you do come up with something, again, feel free to contact me. This recording and the slide deck should be out to you guys hopefully by Friday afternoon. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you. And thank you to our captioner for their work today.